We now come to the Backbench debate on government support for bereaved children, and I call Christine Jardine to speak for up to 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to ask the House to consider government support for bereaved children throughout the country. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Backbench Business Committee and all those who supported my application for this debate, not just on my behalf, for the opportunity to discuss it, but for the many thousands of children and young people in this country who feel that their voices are not heard, they are not being listened to, that we are not hearing what the help is that they need in what for some will be the darkest times they will ever experience. I'm also grateful to this government because actually since they came to power they have shown some appreciation of the problem more than their predecessor. And that's reflected in the fact that their strategy for young people does mention the need for support. But there is so much more that needs to be done, because this is an issue that affects this country on many levels: the human, personal, social and economic. I'll come to the economic issue later. But first, I want to take a moment to explain how I came to this point and why this matters so much to me, and I understand how it matters to others. My dad was just 44 when he collapsed one Saturday morning just before Christmas and died. It was a heart attack. Without any warning, our comfortable, happy, working-class family was plunged into uncertainty. My sisters were 8 and 13. Just having turned 20 the week before, I thought I was an adult, but it was only years later that I appreciated the impact that it had on me, indeed all of us. I had instantly become not just the second adult in the household, but in reality, the second parent in the house. When my own daughter was 8, and then again when she was 13, I struggled with watching her with her dad and realising, probably for the first time, exactly what my sisters had lost, had been through, and what my mother had dealt with. And then, irony of ironies, when my daughter was the same age as I had been, almost to the day, her father died of a sudden, unpredicted heart attack. I saw she wasn't quite an adult and realised that neither had I been. In helping her cope, I saw yet another aspect of our family's dynamic and challenges from a new perspective. But the moment when it came home to me that something had to be done about this on a wider scale was talking to my youngest sister, the one who'd been 8 when Dad died. And she said to me, did I remember that we hadn't had any support from any organisations, from anyone? And she pointed out that that was because before he died, we had never been on the radar of social services or needed support. So at that moment, they didn't know we needed it. There was no support mechanism to help Mum and to discuss the sort of emotional challenges we would face, because nobody was really aware of who we were and what we needed. And in a lot of ways, it's exactly the same today. The organisations are there, the charities are there, they want to help. But unless someone is on the radar of social services, they do not know. They don't know who wants to help them and have no way of knowing where they are and how to contact them. And it's very difficult for families in distress to figure out exactly where to go and how. It's more than 3 years now since I first raised this issue in the House and called for a protocol or a process to identify those young people at the point of their loved one dying. And genuinely there is support across the House, from individual MPs, from the APPG. We've had debates, I've had meetings with ministers, and everyone is supportive. It's just the action that's missing. Too often I've been told, oh, schools and GPs are there to help, and yes, and they do a great job. But bereavement affects every aspect of a child's life, not just school. The Grief Matters for Children campaign showed that children who are bereaved are at an increased risk from depression, anxiety, physical health problems, they have lower academic attainment and are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So yes, GPs and schools are vital, but they're not there at weekends, Christmas, school holidays, or late at night when you need someone to talk to. And what if a child moves home or it's an estranged parent who dies and the school doesn't know. And where there is support, one of the main issues is that there's a huge variation in the provision of services across the UK. They've developed in an ad hoc way, and there are inequalities in provision. Many struggle for funding. Large areas of the country are still without services that support children. And even in areas that do have a service, there's long waiting lists or travel times, and services survival is precarious. The pandemic made it worse. Waiting lists for child bereavement services were increasing, and there were already concerns about access, which just got exacerbated. So we need to do more. Which brings me back to how we know the children are to help, the protocol and the process I've called for. Data. We don't collect data. We've no way of knowing. And it would be so simple. When someone dies, the registrar could just take a note if there was a child or children affected. And that would be a chance to signpost the family to support with relevant local information. We could give families the opportunity to opt in to a real-time referral pathway similar to those for families bereaved by suicide. Local data on the number of children and young people bereaved could be combined with activity data from local services to identify what proportion of children and young people are getting support. Data on which children and young people have been bereaved could be linked to other data sets, such as those in use of health services. Understanding of the impact of bereavement on children's health and their futures could be so much improved just by taking a note when someone dies. Knowing through that where children are, who needs help, what help they need would make such a difference. Then we need to make sure they're getting the right help, of course. When they were asked by the UK Commission on Bereavement what they needed, half of the bereaved young children and young people and adults who shared their experiences said they got only a little or no support from their education setting after their bereavement. So the Commission recommended that all education establishments should have a bereavement policy, including staff training and a process for supporting bereaved children and their families. What a difference that would make. And Winston's Wish, the charity, led the Ask Me education campaign. It takes this a step further, asking all schools to sign up to a manifesto to pledge to see each bereaved student as an individual and ask one simple but powerful question. What do you need? How do we support you? So I would ask the government, given the critical role that schools play in children's lives and the fact we already acknowledge that they do so much work, given the fact that the answer is always to turn to those schools, what is the government doing to improve the consistency and tailoring of bereavement support in educational establishments in support of pupils' well-being and their learning? And can we finally make sure that after 20 years that grief education becomes a vital part of the national curriculum and attempts to get over our national aversion of talking about grief? Because if we don't start talking about grief more openly and regularly, we'll never begin to tackle the problems it creates in society. We know that children, as I've said, who suffer bereavement and don't have support in coping with the trauma will likely have problems in later life, more likely to have difficulty forming relationships, more likely to get into trouble, more likely to live in poverty. Various reports show, including one by Sue Ryder, grief costs the UK economy an estimated £23 billion a year. Now, we could help to mitigate that. We could take preventative measures that protect children and also safeguard a healthy economy in the process. A situation that hasn't been helped by the change in bereavement payment to families and the fact that they've been frozen for the past 9 years. So I would ask the government, will they address that particular shortcoming? Will they fix it? When I started to get involved and work in this area a few years ago, one of the charities I spoke to, which works with adults bereaved with children, warned me. They said, you might be opening a can of worms for yourself. I didn't think so. Now I'm not so sure. Meeting young people who faced losing someone close, felt they didn't have the support they needed or the understanding, has been both inspirational in seeing how they've coped and heartbreaking, knowing that they've lost an important emotional and economic anchor in their lives, sometimes the only emotional anchor. And no moment drove that home to me more than when I had a meeting in Parliament with Winston's Wish and some young people. One girl thanked me for everything I was doing and said, "But you see, you understand, don't you?" And I do, and I'm not the only one. But I also know that my sisters and I were very lucky. We may not have had the official support that we needed, and all young people deserve, but we did have support. Too many children will today face the trauma that we and hundreds of others have without support. An estimated 127 children every day in this country. That every 20 minutes, while we've been standing here, someone has lost a parent. Above all else, those children ask us to ask them what they need, and then to make sure that the authorities, ourselves included, make sure it's provided. Make sure that no child in this country feels alone, unsupported, or lost without the friend, sibling, or parent that they've lost. I would ask the government to make sure that they get that help. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order paper, I call Maureen Burke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member of Edinburgh West for securing this debate. We all know that there is no good time to be bereaved, no convenient moment to lose a loved one, and no guarantee that you're equipped to cope with loss at any time of life. But to lose a loved one as a child must surely be one of the most isolating experiences imaginable. Your friends haven't encountered anything like it, and the adults in your life might not feel confident in knowing how to help you. From my work chairing the APPG for grief support, I know that as a society we remain woefully under-equipped to handle grief between adults, let alone navigating loss in childhood. Bereavement that is left unaddressed can lead to serious problems at any time in life. For children, these are only magnified. It is well documented that grief that is left unresolved can lead to a pathway towards unemployment, crime, imprisonment and homelessness. If this occurs in childhood, the effects can be lifelong and snowball into problems that can start to feel impossible to overcome. Charities across the sector point to the lack of data as the starting point for our failure to properly support grief in childhood. We simply do not know how many children encounter bereavement. This means we don't know where to target support or what the scale of the problem is. When support can be given, it's incumbent on all of us to encourage open, honest and frank discussions about loss. The work of charities such as Cruse and Winston's Wish is incredible, but we should not have to rely on a postcode lottery of local organisations or the variable levels of staff training across our schools and colleges. Teachers need to know where to access dedicated support as soon as they need it, and they need training to help children when they need it the most. There are, of course, many examples of good practice across our schools in supporting bereaved children. I want to draw attention to some of the incredible work that has been taking place at Oakwood Primary School in my constituency. When the staff and students at Oakwood were faced with the tragic consequences of a car accident in the autumn of last year, which led to the death of a classmate, they addressed the bereavement head-on, led by their incredible head teacher, Vanessa Thompson. A garden of remembrance was created and students were encouraged to speak out about their feelings with their teachers and each other. Encouraging conversation in this way and providing a dedicated space to grieve and talk about loss goes a long way to moving away from a culture of silence around death. Encouraging conversations about loss must be at the heart of any policy intervention in this area, and work in the school should act as a great example to others. I hope that continuing to draw attention to the importance of supporting bereaved children through debates such as this and the work of the APPG on grief support, that we can continue to improve the support available to staff, students and parents. This should start with collecting the basic data that will enable us to get a better picture of what is needed and where. Thank you.
Kevin Bonavia.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would also like to add my own personal thanks to the member for Edinburgh West, not just for securing today's debate, but also for being such a powerful champion on this cause. I came to it personally myself through leading a petitions debate, which the Honourable Member took part in, and I really appreciated that at the time. And I took on that debate because I was a member of the Petitions Committee, and it actually opened up my own experience. And to do a petitions debate, as members may know, if you're preparing for it, you meet the petitioners, and the petitioners for this debate, this was in December 2024, were Mark Lemon, who's leading a petition to collect data, as has been touched on by the Honourable Member, and also by John Adams, who is leading a petition to make bereavement part of the national curriculum. And so I spoke to both of them, and both of them had their own stories, just like we heard from the Honourable Member, and of course the member for Glasgow North East has touched on some of the experiences she's heard about. And it reminded me that actually this can touch us in many other ways. So in my case, my dad got throat cancer when I was in my teens. He passed away when I was 20 years old. I was mostly away at the university at the time, but I had a younger brother who was 15 when he passed. And I didn't really appreciate at the time just how hard it was on him. My mum was obviously overcome with it all herself, and he didn't have the life that I subsequently was lucky enough to have. He had it hard. He was out of school, in some tough years, and he's no longer with us now. So looking back on it, it would really, I think, have made a real difference if that support that some people do have, and some of it has improved over the years, if that had been there. There has been progress, and around the country there are many fantastic organisations. We've heard about, obviously, Winston's Wish, that is around the country, and they took part and supported that petition debate that I led. And in my own area, in my constituency, in fact, there is a charity called Stand By Me, which has been fantastic. And I met them at a summer fair in Nebworth, and I met a mum and a young girl, Evie, her young daughter Evie, and they showed me what could be done. Evie had support from that charity, but also became a young ambassador, and it's kids getting that support from other kids who've been through it, and that's great. But we've already heard that support is so patchy around our country. I'm really glad that there has been progress. Those two petitions I mentioned, the first one about having bereavement on the national curriculum, the government listened to that, and the minister's predecessor was at the petition debate and took that on board, and that has now happened. And we've now got that in RHSE strategy that it's got, but it's got to be implemented. And so I would ask the minister, how is that going? How are we monitoring our schools taking up? Are we giving the schools the support they need? But on that second petition about collecting data, Absolutely. How can you know what the problem you face is if you don't know the extent of that problem? How many children are out there that for whatever reason, they or their families, it's not reported through the system? How can we make it easier for that to happen? And surely it cannot be on the wits of man or woman to change that approach. We can do it. Where there is a will, we can do it. And so while the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West has made that point, that there has been progress, I ask this government to go even further, because there are kids out there who need that support, and we must do all that we can in this place and elsewhere to give it. Thank you.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Caroline Voaden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West for her very powerful speech introducing this debate and all her work on this subject. Now, it's normal in debates in this chamber to bring the stories of our constituents to illustrate the issue, but I'm going to share my own story as well today. In 2002, I had a 5-month-old baby and a 2-year-old toddler, and my beloved husband was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer. A year later, he died just a week before Ellie's 4th birthday, and Laura was 17 months old. Now, you can't explain to a baby or to a 4-year-old what death means. One day their parent is there, the next he's gone. I remember Laura, who had just learnt to say the word dada, going round the house, opening the doors, going dada, dada, because she couldn't find him. I didn't really know anything about the impact of bereavement on children, but in the last 20 years, I've learned quite a lot. In the UK, around 120 children are bereaved of a parent every day. Sorry.
Give way. She's making a very powerful speech, and I think we're all very honoured to hear it.
Caroline Voaden.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. So, in the UK, around 120 children are bereaved of a parent every day. By age 16, approximately 1 in 20 young people in the UK will have experienced the death of a parent. I became the chair of the Widowed and Young organisation, and I met loads of kids and their parents through that work, many of whom I'm still friends with today, and I saw the impact on scores of children who had lost their mum or their dad. And there are thousands more in the UK who've lost a sibling, which is also a profound grief for children that is little understood. I saw these children grow up and adjust to their loss, the progress they made and then the setbacks, the challenges with attachment and loss, fear and abandonment, the issues with friendships and relationships, struggles with school, dangerous coping mechanisms and risk-taking in the teenage years, mental health challenges, anger, intense emotions, anxiety, and just for the sake of my daughters, that's not all, that's not all related to them. While children are navigating all of that, the challenge of becoming a single parent at exactly the same moment that you are bereaved cannot be understated. And this is compounded exponentially when the bereavement is sudden and unexpected. The day my husband died, my children came home from nursery and needed me to be the same reliable, loving, stable mum they knew. Up at 7 the next day, needing their breakfast, and so it went on. There's not much time to navigate your own grief in all of that. But on top of that is also the loss of income. The challenge of holding down a job, bringing in a wage, while being a single parent, a grieving single parent to grieving children is immense, and the unaffordable costs of childcare that enable you to go to work at all. But in a way, I was lucky, because I was bereaved before 2017, and I received the Widowed Parents Allowance, a payment that was funded by the national insurance contributions that my husband Nick had made during 20 years of full-time work. Contributions designed to pay into a system that is meant to pay out when needed. He will never receive a state pension. What difference did it make? It made all the difference. It allowed me to work part-time. It allowed me to be present for my children, to help keep them stable while the world around them felt unsafe and scary. It made a part-time income go further. It helped pay for childcare. And it helped me pay for a few out-of-school activities so my children could live the same life as their peers and pay for the holiday clubs, which they had no choice but to go to so that I could go to work, and they didn't always want to.
Would the Honourable Member give way?
I will give way.
I thank the Honourable Member greatly for giving way. In 2024, my constituent Claire lost her husband to personal tragedy. Overnight, she became sole parent to her 3-year-old son. Sorry, this is personal as well. I was going to talk about me, and I'm not going to talk about me, but anyway. She rightly points out that the fixed 18-month limit on bereavement support payments creates a financial cliff edge for widowed parents, and to which you've referred. Sorry, the Honourable Member has referred already. But her point was that, would the Honourable Member, and maybe the Minister too, agree that grief and the permanent loss of income and the parenting responsibilities for all children, particularly for very young children, do not end at that arbitrary 18-month period, that cut-off point, and that this really should be rethought? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I couldn't agree more. So in 2017, all that changed. The previous Conservative government replaced widowed parents' allowance with bereavement support payment, an 18-month flat-rate payment paid regardless of the child's age. A decision that drew cross-party criticism, opposed at the time by us, by the SNP, by Labour MPs. A decision that severed the historic link between national insurance contributions and long-term family protection. A decision that created measurable disadvantage for widowed parents and bereaved children. Bereavement support payment has not been uprated since it was introduced, and it remains at 2011 figures. And the very minimum we are asking for today is for the government to uprate in line with inflation, and I would ask the Minister to respond to this call. But I want to see the government go further and consider calls from campaigning organisations like WAY to reinstate a bereavement payment that lasts until children leave school, to iron out the disadvantage that children are under from the moment they lose a parent. Grief does not last 18 months. Bereavement lasts a lifetime, and for children, it comes back again and again in huge destabilising waves every time they reach a different stage of growth and understanding of what death really means. And believe me, you do have to keep going through it again and again as they get older, explaining exactly what death means and no, he's not coming back, and what they did to his body and all of that stuff. And it goes on right the way to adulthood. And parents navigate this through a child's life. And if you add the extra strain of financial worries onto a widowed parent, you are making a difficult job far harder and putting that bereaved child into an even more dangerous place. Lucy from West Sussex is 31 and a teacher. Her husband died aged 36 from sudden adult death syndrome in January 2023, out of the blue with no warning. Her children were 9, 6 and 3 when their dad died. She said, losing one income overnight has a huge knock-on effect. Combined with rising living costs, there are times I genuinely struggled to afford food. I always made sure my children ate, but that often meant skipping meals myself or relying on the cheapest food just to get through the week. I've had to use food banks. Even now, those payments would still make a meaningful difference to us as a family, not as a luxury, but as support that recognises what has been lost and what continues long after the funeral. And we know that poverty is directly linked to poorer life chances, reduced attainment in school, more vulnerability to harms, and there is a societal impact to this too. Taking it to its very extreme, there is an association between bereavement and negative outcomes, so it's perhaps unsurprising that bereavement is prevalent among people in custody. The Centre for Crime and Justice Studies reported that 41% of young offenders have experienced the death of a parent as a child, a rate which is significantly higher than the general population. And other research shows up to 90% of young men aged 16 to 20 in specific institutions had suffered at least one bereavement, with many experiencing multiple traumatic losses. And as the Honourable Member for Glasgow North East said, we do not do grief well in this country. It is still often something to be brushed under the carpet. It makes people, and I know this from my own personal experience, it makes people embarrassed and awkward. It is something to be avoided, not talked about. So we desperately need grief education, as my honourable friend had said, because it could be transformational. On top of the financial calls we're making on the government today, we support the Winston's Wish Ask Me campaign, a campaign to make nurseries, schools, colleges and universities places where grieving students feel seen, understood and supported. Right now, at least one child or young person in every classroom across the UK is grieving the death of a parent or sibling. And 72% of students who were bereaved while in education said they had never been asked what support they need. And as my honourable friend said, the question they need asking is, what do you need and how can we support you? And I remember vividly having to go through the story of my children's bereavement again and again with different teachers every time they moved up the school or moved to a new school, making sure that they were aware that the children had lost their dad when they were very young. And I often felt that they just didn't understand the impact or how the loss could manifest itself at different ages as they grew. Emmeline told me that her brother died aged 10 after a long illness. She said, I was 11 and my sister was 13. We said goodbye to him in the hospital, but it didn't feel real. And when he died, we had so many unanswered questions that we didn't feel able to ask for fear of upsetting our already grief-stricken parents. Although family members, teachers and our friends were kind to us, we weren't offered any kind of counselling or professional support. I doubt it existed back then, but in hindsight, this was something we really needed. I struggled with the grief for years, and as an adult, I sought counselling to unravel those feelings, to learn how to cope with them when they resurfaced, and understand the impact that losing my brother had had on me. And the honourable member opposite referred to this in his own very powerful speech. I'm sure had this help been available when I was younger, I would have been able to express my grief more openly and come to terms with it much earlier. I can completely see how losing a close family member could negatively change the course of a child's life and in some cases impact society itself. If you work with children as a teacher, care worker, youth leader or wellbeing professional, understanding developmental grief is essential. Grief is not rare. It is a common childhood experience that shapes how children see themselves and the world. And I know we're asking a lot of schools at the moment with big changes on the horizon once again. But for me, this is a small but absolutely fundamental ask that nurseries and schools take the time to understand how grief affects children and how they can be supported. And schools must have the tools to signpost families to support organisations. And I absolutely agree with the calls today for data to be collected on how many children have suffered a bereavement like this, and it could be done through registrar offices, because until we understand the problem, we can't begin to fix it. So I say to the Minister again, talk to the Department for Education. The Minister is from the Department of Education. I wasn't sure who would be responding to this debate. Can we discuss how to implement better understanding of developmental grief across the education lifetime? Can we find a way to collect data through registrar services? Talk to your colleagues in the Department for Work and Pensions about uprating bereavement support payments now in line with inflation. And begin the conversation about reinstating a bereavement payment that lasts until children leave school to give them the best chance to overcome the impact of the death of a parent. Bereavement is a long, complicated and difficult journey. And after 23 years, you can see it is still very, very real. Adding financial hardship to that journey is unjust, it is discriminatory, and it's time it ended.
Shadow Secretary of State Laura Trott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I say how much of a privilege it's been to be part of this debate today, and how much I admire all of those who've spoken about their personal stories. I do not underestimate for a second how difficult that is, but taking a catastrophic event and trying to make other people's lives better is about the most admirable thing that I think that you can do. I congratulate the Honourable Lady for securing this debate today and the Backbench Business Committee for putting it in place. She is so self-evidently right in what she says that there needs to be a general strategy and that we should have data available. I think it's worth thinking why that might not have happened to date. and to make some suggestions about how we can overcome those barriers in the future. The government is historically bad at cross-departmental data collection. We know this. It's something that has been grappled with over time. There has not been a clear solution to it to date. There have been some occasions where it has worked better. Where I've seen that be effective is where there is a cross-departmental working committee on something specific. And I offer that up as a suggestion to the Education Minister for something that might work in this case. For example, there have been some changes in recent years where there is no wrong door policy for reporting a death. That took a lot of time because what was happened previously is when you were reporting a death, as I'm sure unfortunately many people in this room have experience of, that you had to go to multiple government departments before it was the case that the death could be recognised. That has been changed, that has been a better change, and I do hope that something similar could be adopted in this particular case. The member for Glasgow North East, and I should also honour the work of APPG, which I know does some incredible work in this area, mentioned about good practice in schools. And I also think this is something that we can think about how more systematically to actually collate. We are quite effective where it comes to education policy now with something called the Education Endowment Foundation. It picks up what works from an academic perspective and it shares good practice amongst schools. This is something that is actually missing by and large in the SEND space, but it's also missing here. We've heard today about some really good practice. The Honourable Lady mentioned Oakwood Primary School, but I'm sure that is the case up and down the country. But there actually isn't a place where that can be shared effectively. And I wonder whether that's something that the department could pick up and think about how to take forward. I'm sure that there will be guidance, and I'm equally sure that it could be made better. In terms of what we do in terms of the overall data collection, obviously this is something that when you report a death, it is linked to one individual rather than to a wider database. That change is going to need to be made, but of course the referral onto the pathway is the critical point that the Honourable Lady made that needs to change. And she also mentions that now happens in the cases of suicide, I think it was. And I think this is something that I hope to see the Minister take up today, because, again, we've seen that can work previously. So it feels like something that may take time, and I think we all acknowledge that. Government is difficult. It is difficult to wrangle different places together, but I think that is something that could definitely be taken forward. I was quite shocked today before I was preparing for this debate. I didn't actually realise the figures for the outcomes for bereaved children. And I think if you haven't gone through this catastrophic event, it is too easy to overlook the impact that it has on young people. And I thought the statistic that the member for South Devon gave around the number of offenders who have suffered a bereavement was very shocking. And I hope and believe that this will give even more grist to the mill of the Education Minister to try and deal with this, because this is one of the very many things that we see across government where early intervention, helping people, is not only the right thing to do, but it's also something that will benefit us and wider society. And I think today what we have really seen is that, of course, many children who go through this have amazing families. We've had some examples of these amazing families here today who have people around them who will support them, who will help them, who will do whatever they can to ameliorate this catastrophic incident. But that's not true of every family. And, of course, the state will miss things, but if we can set up a situation where we can minimise the impact of this catastrophic event on young people, of course it is the right thing to do. I should say I'm very grateful to be part of this House today, because I think that it's these types of debates that take place in a relatively empty chamber on a Thursday afternoon that can really make a difference to young people across the country. You've got a very good minister there, and I'm sure he's about to tell us how he's going to sort this all out after many years. But I commend the many voices who have spoken up today, and I'm grateful to have been here for it.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate and respond on behalf of the Government to a debate that's so constructive and heartfelt in nature. I want to thank everybody for contributing to this debate today, and particularly to the member for Edinburgh West for securing the debate and for her opening speech, in which she reflects not only her own personal experience but her long-standing efforts championing these issues on behalf of so many children and families outside of this place, and I think this House is better for it and her contribution. I'd like to turn just to a few of the remarks from speakers that we've had in the debate so far. My honourable friend, the member for Glasgow North East, and the work that she highlighted that's being done, the brilliant work that is being done by Vanessa Thompson and her team at Oakwood School, I believe it's Oakwood School, in her constituency, which is a reflection on the importance of what happens in classrooms and the essential role that teachers have to play, and I'll turn to say a bit more about that in the speech later. My honourable friend, the member for Stevenage, the experience that he has had of meeting Mark and John as petitioners, and the power of people sharing their experiences, which I think is probably the thing I will take away from this debate today more than anything, and sharing the very painful experience of his experience and his experience of losing his younger brother. And I am sure his younger brother would be very proud of him and hearing the speech that he gave today. And finally, the honourable member, my honourable friend for South Devon, and her personal experience and those of her children. And in particular, the long tail of effect on families from losing a loved one and needing to navigate that alone, and the isolation that must come from that. And I think the point that is made on bereavement support is valid. It's a point well made. It's not something within my gift as a Minister at the Department for Education, but I'd be very happy to facilitate a meeting with the Minister who is responsible for those issues. I think, as we've heard today, bereavement cuts across all of our lives and is something that we all will experience. It's universal. Responsibility for bereavement crosses boundaries between government departments, and I'm pleased to be responding to this debate on behalf of the Government as the Minister for Children and Families. Grief comes to all of us and is something we experience uniquely and at different times. Loss can be particularly hard for children. It's therefore vital that young people are helped and have someone to turn to for support when they need it. Given my role as a Minister at the Department for Education, I will start and focus most on the role that is played by schools, where the Government has taken important steps to support bereaved children. Firstly, on the 15th of July last year, we published revised relationship, sex and health education curriculum guidance with a focus on supporting young people to develop resilience and to live healthy, full lives. During the consultation process, we heard that the RSHE curriculum should do more to recognise bereavement. We have carefully listened to these voices, many of the organisations that have been referenced by members today. And as a result, for the first time, the guidance now contains new content about coping strategies for dealing with issues like anxiety, and specifically covers issues like loneliness and bereavement. As a society, we should become more open, as members have said, to discussing loss. And this is an important step to opening up that conversation with our young people in a sensitive and early way. Teachers can also draw on a wide range of external expertise and resources to help tailor their lessons. And I want to express my gratitude to organisations like the Anna Freud Centre and the National Association of Funeral Directors, who provide invaluable support to children and young people coping with loss and bereavement. In developing this guidance, we worked closely with experts on childhood bereavement, including the Childhood Bereavement Network. I'm extremely grateful for their help, as well as all other organisations and individuals who've contributed to that guidance. I'd also like to thank individuals like Caroline Booth, who my honourable friend, the member for Halifax, has drawn my attention to. Schools can choose to adopt the revised RSHE statutory guidance now, and in response to the honourable member for Stevenage's question, will be required to teach the new content from September later on this year. Rollout of the new guidance has been supported by many organisations who have helped develop it and are working on quality materials for teachers to use in our schools. Schools also have a wider role to play in supporting the resilience and mental health of children and young people. This is why we've made mental well-being as well as health education compulsory for all pupils in state-funded schools. Pupils should be aware that change and loss, including bereavement, can provoke a wide range of feelings, and that grief is a natural response to bereavement and that everyone grieves differently. Pupils are taught how to recognise and talk about their emotions, including having a varied vocabulary of words to use when talking about their own and others' feelings, and how to judge whether what they are feeling and how they are behaving is appropriate and proportionate. Pupils are taught to discuss their feelings with an adult and seek support. They're taught where and how to seek support, including whom in school they should speak to, and if they're worried about their own or someone else's mental well-being or ability to control their emotions. This government is committed to improving mental health support for all children and young people. The government will provide access to specialist mental health professionals in every school by expanding mental health support teams, so every child and young person has access to early support to address problems before they escalate. Of course, for whatever reason, young people may not always want to access support at school. As a result, it's important to look for ways to better help young people to access alternative sources of support. This includes the fantastic support that's available in the charitable sector, and there's been a number of organisations mentioned by members, and I'd like to congratulate the work that they do across the country. To name just two here that have not been mentioned so far, officials in my department recently met with Scotty's Little Soldiers, who provide support for children and families of the armed services, and Sibling Support, a UK-wide charity providing critical help to children who suffer the heartbreaking loss of a sibling. Last year, we added new links to key gov.uk pages for those who have suffered a bereavement. Previously, these included no reference to children. I'd like to thank the Childhood Bereavement Network for their support with the department in ensuring this has happened. The Honourable Lady, the Shadow Education Secretary, mentioned the importance of cross-government working. We have continued to ensure that consideration of children remains a priority for the cross-government bereavement working group that's chaired by the Department for Health and Social Care and the membership from a broad range of government departments. This group meets quarterly and continues to consider options for improving services for all bereaved people, including bereaved children. This group was formed following the UK Commission on Bereavement in 2012 with their report, Bereavement is Everyone's Business. In November 2025, the UK CB Steering Group, including members from the Childhood Bereavement Network, attended a meeting of the Cross-Government Bereavement Working Group to share progress with their report's recommendations and discuss further work. Furthermore, during the National Grief Awareness Week in December, Baroness Merrin attended the annual meeting of the UKCB Commissioners, chaired by the now Archbishop of Canterbury, Dame Sarah Mullally, to discuss progress implementing the report's recommendations and hear from adults and children with direct experience. In summary, bereavement will come to all of us, and sadly, very sadly for some, this will be when they are still young and figuring out the world around them. I know that all of those who've spoken today and the many experts and charities working in this area share a commitment to ensuring that every child is aware of and able to access the support that they need to navigate some of the most difficult times they will ever experience. I thank everyone for contributing today, for sharing very personal and moving stories and being prepared to do so in a chamber where I hope they feel that everyone has been willing them on to share those experiences. And again, I would like to pay tribute and deep thanks to the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West for her continued campaigning and passion in this area, and I look forward to working with her in the future to make progress in this essential field.
Christine Jardine to wind up.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd just like to thank everyone who's taken part today and who has spoken so movingly and powerfully about their own experiences and those they've spoken to. I'd like to thank the Minister for laying out the steps that the Government is already taking and moving towards that better understanding and better support that we've all talked about. But I think, if I may, I think the Shadow Secretary of State for Education actually summed it up. It is on occasions like this, when there are no party divisions, when we talk as individuals to one another about a problem which affects us all and the people we know and we represent, that we see the best in this House. And I actually think that if there are any of those children who are grieving at the moment watching, they will hopefully think that we have taken that first step in listening to what they've been telling us and moving towards what they need to support them. So thank you.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.